Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we will be discussing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 22nd March 2020. Now before starting today's discussion, there is an announcement that the prelims compass of Indian economy, the environment, ecology and biodiversity and the government schemes have been released on Amazon and they will also be available at bookstores near you. And the link for buying these prelims compass magazines has been provided in the description below this video. And you might be knowing that we have already released the prelims compass for Indian polity, science and technology and the history, art and culture. And the links for those prelims compass magazines are also available in the description box below. And the articles that we are going to discuss today are displayed on your screen. So let us start our discussion. Now this article on page number 14 is related to the development of vaccine against the COVID-19 or the coronavirus disease. And this article discusses mainly what are vaccines, how are they made, and what are the current developments across the world regarding the development of the vaccine of COVID-19 disease. Now, some of the points that have been discussed in this article can be important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And in this, we will look at various aspects of the vaccination and how the vaccinations help in developing immunity against diseases. And also we'll look at what are the current developments regarding the development of this vaccine. And in this we will briefly look at the mRNA vaccine which is being developed in the United States of America and how will it function or how it is supposed to function in the near future. So first in this article, let us understand what are these vaccines and how does the process of vaccination work. So simply the principle of vaccination is based on the property of memory of the immune system. And generally, the immunity that is present in the human body is of two types. That is the innate immunity and the second is that of acquired immunity. Now the innate immunity is inbuilt in the human body. And this innate immunity is reflected or represented in the form of physical barriers that are present in our body. So for example, the skin cover that we have is also a kind of innate immunity system that is present in the body. Second type of immunity is known as the acquired immunity and that can be acquired in two ways. One is the active way and the second one is the passive way. And under the active acquired immunity system, the host is exposed to antigens and in response to this, the human immune system produces antibodies and as such, a vaccine is the substance that resembles the disease causing agent or the pathogen but does not cause the disease and it trains the body's immune system to recognize and kill the pathogen and create a memory for the future. So basically, the process of vaccination is built on the memory of the immune system for the future. And for this, the human body is exposed to the disease causing agent or a pathogen which resembles the disease causing agent. And that creates or develops the immunity in the human body. Now, what are the different ways in which the vaccines can be developed? So the first way is to develop the inactivated vaccine. And under this, the pathogen can be grown outside the body itself. And then it is purified and inactivated with chemicals. And this particular process is being experimented by China presently for the development of the COVID-19 vaccine. Now previously this method has already been used and this is reflected in the injectable polio vaccine that is being used across the globe. Second type of development of vaccination is the weakened vaccine. And under this, the pathogen is considerably weakened by repeated culture or by genetic means. And oral polio vaccination is a type of weakened vaccine. And the third way in which the vaccine can be developed is that one of the proteins on the pathogen surface can be produced artificially and it can be used to raise the immunity of the human system. And this process for the development of the vaccine has been used in the development of hepatitis B vaccine. So these are few ways in which the vaccines are developed across the globe. Now presently what China is experimenting is based on the inactivated vaccine system, while the way in which the United States of America is developing the vaccine for COVID-19 is based on the third method. Now, how do these vaccines help? So, let us look at the biology behind the importance of these vaccines. So, our body, when it encounters a pathogen for the first time, produces a response which is called as the primary response. And this kind of primary response by the immune system is of low intensity. And once the human body has produced this primary response, and in future, if it subsequently again encounters the same pathogen, it provides a highly intensified secondary response. And this secondary response, which is of highly intensified nature, is because of the memory of the immune system of the first encounter with that kind of pathogen. Now, how are these primary and secondary responses taking place in the human body? So these primary and secondary immune responses are carried out with the help of two types of lymphocytes which are present in our blood, and they are the beta lymphocytes and the T lymphocytes. Now, an important thing to be noted about the B lymphocytes is that they produce an army of proteins in response to the pathogens in our blood, and these proteins are called as antibodies. Now, while the beta lymphocytes themselves produce these proteins which are antibodies, the T lymphocytes themselves do not secrete any kind of antibodies. And this can be a particularly important aspect for us from the preliminary examination point of view, that the T cells or the T lymphocytes themselves do not secrete any antibodies. However, they help the B lymphocytes or the beta cells to produce these antibodies. And this is how, by the working of these B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes, the human body is able to produce such primary and secondary immune responses. So now, how are the vaccines being developed against the COVID-19 disease? So first one is being developed by China, and as we have learned that it will be an inactivated vaccine development. And this is being done by purifying the COVID-19 virus, and which will be killed by the usage of formaldehyde. However, the US is developing a weakened vaccine, and it will use the genetically engineered COVID-19 virus that replicates poorly, and this will be used to develop the human immune response system. And the kind of vaccine which is being developed by the United States of America is popularly known as the mRNA vaccine. So let us look at the key aspects of this mRNA vaccine. So now the vaccine that is being developed by the United States of America is the mRNA vaccine. Now you might be knowing that the genetic coding of a living organism is stored in the double helix structure which is known as DNA. And these DNAs store all the genetic information of the living organisms. Now these DNAs produce proteins which are responsible for every function in the human body. And the conversion of these DNA codes into proteins requires a single-stranded molecule which is known as the mRNA or the messenger ribonucleic acid. So this vaccine, which is known as the mRNA 1273, is a piece of RNA that carries the code to make the COVID-19 virus spike protein when it is introduced into the cells. And this protein, which is present on the virus's surface, is critical for the entry into the cells. And the immunity to this spike protein, which is critical for the entry of this virus into the cells, can be blocked by the introduction of the vaccine, which is known as mRNA 1273, because it will do a slow inoculation of the spike protein in the human body. And as such, the human body will start developing the antibodies which will stop or block the entry of the virus and its multiplication. And as such, it can be an effective vaccine against the COVID-19 disease. So in this article, we have briefly looked at the mechanism of vaccination, how the vaccines help, and what is the role played by the beta lymphocyte cells and the T lymphocyte cells. And also, how is this mRNA vaccine going to help us in countering the COVID-19 disease? Now, this mRNA vaccine development is still at the trial stage, and still it will require some months to be produced commercially and to be an effective cure of the COVID-19 disease. So with this, let's take up the next news article now. Now this article on page number 13 is related to the recent decision of the Union Cabinet, under which the Cabinet has approved three major schemes to boost the domestic manufacturing of electronic goods and to enable India to get integrated into global value chains. So this can be important for us from the General Studies paper 3 under the mains examination under the topic economic development. So in this article, let us look at the key objectives of launching these three schemes. Secondly, we will look at the present status of the electronics industry in India, and also will look at the details of these three newly launched schemes. Now, the three major objectives of launching these schemes are to attract the multinational companies like the Apple, Samsung, Oppo, etc., and to start the manufacturing of mobile phones for exports from India. Second is to enable the Indian companies to become global champions. And the third important objective is to attract investments in selected electronic components such as semiconductors, transistors, etc. And this will enable India to get integrated into the global value chains. So now if we look at the present status of electronics industry in India, let us first look at the production of the electronic goods in India and its current status. Now the electronics industry is one of the fastest growing industries and it accounts for almost 2.3% of India's GDP. And the annual production of electronic goods has increased from $30 billion in 2014 and 15 to $70 billion in 2018 and 19, which is a compounded annual growth rate of about 25%. Further, India has also emerged as the second largest manufacturer of mobile phones after China. And the annual production of mobile phones has increased from $3 billion in 2014 and 15 to $24 billion in 2018 and 19. And the domestic demand of the mobile phones is almost completely met out of the domestic production itself. So this is the current status of the production of electronic goods in India. However, regarding the demand for electronic goods in India, you should note that the annual import of electronic goods has increased to $56 billion due to higher demand in India. However, in the last decade, that is between 2011 to 2019, the import of electronic goods has grown the fastest, and it was negligible at the beginning of 2011, and now its share has increased to almost 3.6%. And China alone accounts for 67% of India's imports. And thus, India has not been able to replicate its success of IT sector in the electronics sector. And we note that India has a huge trade deficit with that of China, and that is why it wants to increase the production of electronics goods in India itself. Now, after looking at the current status of production and also the increasing demand of electronic goods and the increasing imports, let us look at what is the potential for electronics manufacturing in India. So in this regard, India has the potential to replicate China's success and become the global leader in manufacturing of electronic goods. And the increase in production costs of electronic goods in China has made it possible for India to become major destination of electronic manufacturing and exports. Further, India needs to get integrated into the global value chains by focusing on manufacturing of electronic components such as semiconductors, etc. And in this regard, you might be knowing that in the Union Budget of 2020 and 21, this budget has highlighted the Assemble in India has to be integrated into Make in India. So currently India is importing various parts of the electronic equipments and they are assembling them in India. However, now India wants that its domestic industries start producing those parts themselves in India itself. And also the economic survey has highlighted that this would increase India's export share from current 1.6% to 3.5% by 2025 and up to 6% by 2030. And also it will help in countering one of the biggest problem that India faces, that is the problem of unemployment. And this would create 4 crore well-paid jobs by 2025 and about 8 crore jobs by 2030. So this shows the immense potential of electronics manufacturing in India, and we note that the price of production of electronic goods in China is increasing day by day. And as such, India can emerge as a major competitor to the Chinese electronic products. So after this, let us look at the new schemes that have been launched or the schemes that have been approved by the Union Cabinet in this regard. Now, the first scheme in this regard is the Production Linked Incentive Scheme for Large Scale Electronics Manufacturing. And the main objective of this scheme is to boost the domestic manufacturing and attract large investments in mobile phone manufacturing and specified electronic components, which will include the assembly, testing, marking, packaging units, etc. And in this regard, the Government of India is likely to extend an incentive of 4 to 6% on incremental sales. And these incentives will be provided for goods manufactured in India for a period of 5 years subsequent to the base year, which will be defined by the Government of India itself. Now, the nature of the incentives is presently being discussed by the Government of India. However, the incentives are likely to be in the form of duty credit scrips, which are provided under the Merchandise Exports from India scheme. Now, the duty credit scrips are export-linked incentive provided to the industries, and the value of scrip depends upon the product and the country to which the goods are exported. And these scrips can be used by the exporters to either pay the taxes to the government or sell them in the open market and raise money. So accordingly, such kind of duty credit scrips will also be provided for electronics manufacturing. And this proposed scheme will cost around rupees 41,000 crores. Now, some of the likely benefits of introduction of such a scheme is that it will attract the global multinational companies such as Apple, Samsung to manufacture in India. Also, it will boost the domestic industries and it will help in realizing the vision which was highlighted in the budget, that is from assembling in India to be integrated into Make in India. And it will lead to a creation of 8 lakh direct and indirect jobs. Now, the second scheme is being launched to promote the domestic manufacturing of electronic components in India. And presently we note that India does not have a strong electronic component manufacturing base. And it mainly imports these electronic components from China and assemble those electronic components into finished products. So this scheme for the promotion of manufacturing of electronic components and semiconductors focuses on the domestic manufacturing of electronic components. So the incentives that will be provided under this scheme will be of 25% of the capital expenditure for the manufacturing of goods that constitute the supply chain of electronic product will be provided by the Government of India. And this will cater to all the segments of electronics manufacturing such as mobile electronics, consumer electronics, industrial electronics, medical electronics, etc. And the likely benefits are that it will lead to the development of electric component manufacturing ecosystem in our country and will also deepen the electronics value chain. And it will lead to new investments in the electronics sector to the tune of at least rupees 20,000 crore and will help in reducing the dependence on import of the components and will ensure the digital security for India. And the third scheme is the Modified Electronics Manufacturing Clusters or the EMC 2.0. And this is aimed at improving the ecosystem for the manufacturing of electronics or targeted manufacturing clusters for the electronics in India. Now, in this regard, earlier the Ministry of Electronics and Information had notified the Electronics Manufacturing Cluster Scheme in 2012. And it aimed at providing support for the creation of world-class infrastructure for attracting investments in the electronic system design and manufacturing sector. Now, this EMC scheme provided grant assistance for setting up of both the greenfield as well as the brownfield projects across the country. And also there is a need for continuation of such a scheme in modified form for strengthening the infrastructure base for the electronics industry in the country. And accordingly, the Modified Electronics Manufacturing Cluster Scheme would support setting up of both the electronic manufacturing clusters and common facility centers. And for this purpose, these electronics manufacturing clusters would be set up in geographically contiguous areas. And the government will focus on the development of basic infrastructure, amenities, and other common facilities. And the benefits are that it will lead to the availability of ready infrastructure and plug and play facility for attracting investments in this sector. Further, it will attract new investments and it will also lead to jobs creation in the manufacturing of electronics. And it will boost the revenue in the form of taxes which will be paid by such manufacturing units. So in this background, we have looked at the electronics sector, its present status, its potential, and how these three government schemes will help in improving the manufacturing of electronics in India, which can be important for us from the mains examination point of view. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 5 is related to the mass nesting of olive Ridley turtles at the Rushikulya beach in Odisha. And details about this olive Ridley turtle can be important for us from the preliminary examination point of view under the environment and ecology section. So in this regard, let us look at key important facts related to the olive Ridley turtles. Now, regarding the olive Ridley turtle, you should note that these are migratory turtle species and they come to India for nesting during the winter season. Now, they are famous for their synchronized nesting in mass numbers, and this type of nesting is known as aribadas. Further, the habitat of these olive Ridley turtles become important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So these olive Ridley turtles are primarily found in the warm and tropical waters of all the important oceans, that is the Pacific Ocean, Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. Further, the nesting sites of olive Ridley turtle that are found in India are important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So here you should note that the Hope Island of Kuringa Wildlife Sanctuary, which is located in the Andhra Pradesh, is one of the important sites for nesting of olive Ridley turtles. And also, as we have seen in this article, the Thottapalli estuary in Kerala is also another important site for the nesting of olive Ridley turtle. They are also found in Gahirmatha beach in the Odisha, Astaranga coast in Odisha, beach of Rushikulya river which is also in Odisha, and in the Devi river mouth in Odisha. So primarily they are found in three states, that is Andhra Pradesh, Odisha and Kerala. Further, the protection status of this animal becomes important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So under the IUCN's red list, it is listed as a vulnerable species. In India's Wildlife Protection Act 1972, they are listed in the Schedule 1, and which means that it has the highest protection and highest penalties are awarded for the killing of this olive Ridley turtle. Further, in the sites, they are listed in the Appendix 1, and you should note that those species which are listed in Appendix 1 are the most endangered among the sites listed animals. Now, all these facts that we have discussed are important for us from the preliminary examination point of view and can be asked in the exam. Now, this next news article on page number 10 is related to India and France's joint patrol from the Reunion Island. Now, in this regard, this joint patrol is not important for us from the exam point of view. However, what is important is the location of this Reunion Island. So, in this, we will look at the location of this island, and also we will have a look at the other important islands of the Indian Ocean, and also under which country are these islands operating presently. For example, this Reunion Island is under the occupation of France. And these islands are strategically very important, and that is why they can be important for us from the exam point of view. And which country controls these islands is also important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So now if you look at this map, it shows that the Reunion Island is located on the eastern side of the Madagascar, and it lies in the southern Indian Ocean. And accordingly, there are other important islands in the Indian Ocean. For example, the Socotora Island, which is under the occupation of Yemen. Then there is Seychelles, and also Saint Denis, which is under the influence of France. Again, the Nouvelle Amsterdam Island is under the influence of France, and the St. Paul's Island is also under the influence of France. So accordingly, you should be aware of the locations of these islands, and which country occupies these islands in the Indian Ocean region. And these maps will be attached in today's PDF, so do go through them. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 10 reads that the AYUSH wellness centers will come under the National AYUSH mission, and this has been approved by the Union Cabinet recently. So, this can be an important aspect for us from the preliminary examination point of view, and in this, let us look at some of the aspects which can be important for exam. So now the decision is that the Union Cabinet has approved the inclusion of AYUSH Health and Wellness Centers component of the Ayushman Bharat into the National AYUSH mission. Now the background is that the National Health Policy 2017 had called for mainstreaming the potential of the AYUSH system with a pluralistic system of integrative healthcare. And under the Ayushman Bharat program, 1.5 lakh health and wellness centers are planned to be created by transforming the existing sub-health centers and the primary health centers to deliver a comprehensive primary health care. And under this, the Ministry of AYUSH had to operationalize 10% of the total sub-health centers as the health and wellness centers. And accordingly, 12,500 AYUSH health and wellness centers will be operationalized within a period of 5 years. And this will be done under two models, that is by the way of upgradation of existing AYUSH dispensaries, which are approximately 10,000 in number, and also by the upgradation of existing sub-health centers, which are approximately 2,500 presently. So the main objective of this step is to establish a holistic wellness model which is based on AYUSH, which can focus on preventive, promotive, curative, etc. healthcare by integration with the existing public health system. And it will also provide informed choice to the needy public by making the AYUSH services available. Now the basics of the National AYUSH mission will be provided in the PDF that is attached to this video. So do go through that, and it can be an important scheme for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Now this article on page number 14 is related to the depreciation of Indian rupee against the dollar. And various aspects of the fall of the rupee against the dollar has been already discussed in the Daily News Simplified of 20th March 2020. So do go through this video to understand the details of the depreciation of Indian rupee. Now after today's discussion, let us take up these practice questions, and the answer for these questions will be displayed after 5 seconds. The first question reads, consider the following statements about the response of the immune system to the vaccination. First is that the beta and the T lymphocytes produce proteins in the bloodstream which fight the pathogens, which is an incorrect statement because it is only the beta lymphocytes which produce the proteins. However, the T lymphocytes supports these beta lymphocytes to produce the proteins. Second is that beta and T lymphocytes are part of the innate immunity in the human body. Now this statement is also incorrect because these are not the part of innate immunity, and they help in developing the immunity in response to the pathogens that enter the human body, and that is why they help in developing the acquired immunity in human body, and hence the correct answer is D here, that is neither one nor two. Second question is that consider the following pairs of the islands of Indian Ocean and the countries to which they belong. First is Reunion Island and France, which is correct. Second is Diego Garcia and United Kingdom, which is also correct. And third is Socotra and Yemen, which is also correct. So the correct answer is D, that is 1, 2 and 3. Now with this we conclude today's discussion. Please stay safe and follow all precautions and follow the norms of social distancing. With this, let's take up the question for the day.